So suggest we'll get started with this kickoff of the concepts that are making up the Sprint 2.3, and this is very much related to geometries. We will be covering existing ways of representing geometries, tessellation geometries, B-rep representations, voxel geometries. We said we would extend a bit so to bring everyone up to speed in terms of what can be done with tin models, tin surfaces within IFC as well. So overall, all the means by which geometries can be described. That's the purpose of this 2.3 sprint. We would like to jump on this first. Is that Stefan doing it, covering the overview of this sprint 2.3, or is that you, Sergey? I don't recall.
I would prefer if Lars or Sergey do it.
Okay.
Most up to date.
Lars is the most involved person.
Okay. Yeah, so you can point your fingers at me.
Yes, it's sort of a hot potato.
That's okay.
That's easy. Easy way out.
Yeah. All right. So Sprint 2.3. This is first. Just ask you. You see my screen sharing? Yeah. Good. Sprint 2.3 kickoff today. Submission on the 29th of May and closure on the 8th of June. Yeah. And as always, we sort of incrementally build on the previous sprints. So this is the last sprint, let's say, where you have the more sort of basic stuff, which is sort of very generally useful. So that when we come to sprint 3, it will be more sort of tunnel related than it has been so far. So let me start. The first thing that we are doing is that we should place the IFC site, which we have defined in Sprint 2.1, either along the IFC alignment or relative to an IFC referent. Maybe we can again show Sergey had some examples on how this could be done. So, I mean, the idea behind this is that we have the alignment aggregated in the project, and you can sort of do a linear breakdown where you might have multiple sites which are positioned along the alignment at different locations. So we are doing this at least then once. And this also means that we have been discussing this in the support calls as well, that we are using, first of all, product relative positioning. So we have a product, in our case, then the IFC site, which is positioned relative to a positioning element. And positioning element, as you see here, you have IFC grid, IFC linear positioning element, or a referent linear positioning element. If we go down there, we have the alignment. So that is one possibility. The other is a referent, and you have already worked with reference. So you know that the reference that we have been working with have been nested along the alignment, and reference can carry information, for example, about stationing. So that means that we can, for example, then position the site relative to a referent or the entire alignment. You can do whatever you prefer there. But that also means that the object placement of the site, its placement relative to, according also to our previous discussions, should point to the positioning element, that is the referent or the alignment, and its object placement. Otherwise you will have an error in the checker. So that's the first one. It's sort of a development of what you have been doing already so far. So are there any questions regarding that? If not, we can go on. So we are introducing also then product geometric representation, and what we encourage you to do is to use this thing, which is a new concept in IFC 4.4, IFC Geoscience Model, but you can use another element if you prefer that. I mean, this is sort of geoscience related. And then you have a choice to use at least one of these representations. So you have body tessellation geometry, where you associate a shape representation, and the shape representation shall then state that identifier and type shall be body and tessellation. And then as geometric representation items, you have either a triangulated face set or a polygonal face set. So that's one option. The next option is a body B-rep geometry, sort of very similar template here. Difference is that you can use then instead as a item, you use faceted B-rep instead. And in this case, the identifier and type shall be body and B-rep. And then we have this one, body surface model geometry. Again, very, very similar. You have body and surface model, and item is a tessellated face set in that case. And then we have a new thing for IFC 4.4, and Sergey is working on generating the documentation for this. Everything has been updated, so we just need to provide you with the documentation, but it is maybe I could I can bring it up later. So it's very, very similar to these other concept templates. So the only difference is that identifier and type shall be body and voxel here, and the item shall be an IFC voxel grid. And we can look at the IFC voxel grid specifically later. So that is actually new. And what we will add then in upcoming sprints 3, there is also this possibility to add data to the individual voxels to represent whatever you want the voxels to represent, but that will come later. So for now, we settle with the voxel grid, the actual geometry, which is then a bunch of voxels, 3-dimensional pixels, where you can specify which voxels actually is filled and which are not filled. So you can actually model a voxel grid with voids, for example, in it, because the voxel grid itself is kind of what do you call it in English? It's sort of a not a cube, but since the sides doesn't have to be equal, but it's what's the term?
How's it in Swedish?
Ja, det är ju ett rätblock typ.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
anyway, you have a number of voxels in each dimension, then X, Y, and Z. But it has the number of voxels doesn't have to be equal for the different dimensions. We can look at the definition of the voxel grid also later.
Yeah, actually, because for me it's the most interesting now. It's this sprint with the voxels, and if we have like any status update on that and how they're placed in the schema, and what kind of check we will have.
Yeah, so I mean the basic structure is the same again. You have some kind of element, for example, in this case, an IFC geoscience model, which has a voxel grid as its shape representation, and the geoscience model should of course also have then a placement, and the geometry exists inside a context which you have defined, so it's not sort of conceptually different from any other kind of geometric representation. Yeah, we also yeah. Sorry.
The term you were looking for is parallelepipeded.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we have one more option for geometric representation, which we thought could be, for example, for representing layers in the terrain. I mean, voxel grid is one that I mean have been asked for from our geoscience domain team, but also maybe surface tessellation could be a viable option as well for geometric representation. So it's sort of the same again. You have a representation identifier and type, in this case being surface and tessellation, and the representation is a triangulated phase set. And what we actually want you to do, if you go into the inheritance hierarchy here, you have triangulated irregular network as a subtype of triangulated phase set. So it's actually this one that we, in this case, would want you to do. So this is what we normally refer to as a tin. And yeah. So these are the geometric representations, but and you should then produce at least one of these. And of course, it's nice, Artemis, if you can provide a voxel grid, because that's actually a new entity. Yeah, and then what we haven't actually done, but I mean, what is a really basic concept in IFC used everywhere is, of course, property sets. And property sets with override, that actually means that, I mean, you can attach, depending on how the property set is defined, you can attach it to a type object and or an occurrence object. And if the property set allows it, you can, for example, attach a property set to a type object, and then you can override perhaps certain properties on occurrence level. But what we simply would like you to do here is to, since we have an IFC site in the file, we actually just picked this PZ land registration, which is already in the IFC specification. And you should assign this an instance of this property set to the IFC site, where you assign the values land ID, is permanent ID, and land title ID. And all these should have values, and we actually say that is permanent ID shall be true, just to be a little bit more specific here. So land ID and land title ID are actually strings, identifiers, and this is permanent ID is a Boolean, and you can look up the property set definition here also with a link. We had also library association in this sprint, and library association is where you we actually need to update this concept template a little bit because it's a little bit too restrictive. So library reference is a reference to something inside another file, typically would be an IFC file with, instead of an IFC project library has the root instance there. And a project library could contain things like property set templates, type objects, and I mean libraries of reusable items then. So in this case, just to sort of link it to this property set that you have instantiated here, and you see this is optional. So just to give you something to chew on, the PZ land registration shall associate an IFC library reference where the location of the library reference should be a URI value pointing to the computer interpretable listing of the IFC 4.4 draft specification. So this is sort of some detective work for you to find that URI. And then the identification should be number 3540, and you can perhaps check there what you find. And the name shall be PZ land registration. So this essentially means that you actually reference a property set, the property set template for this property set, which is the actual definition of the structure of the property set.
I have a question here in
Yes.
the libraries. Can it, I mean, we will refer to something which can be reusable. Can that be, let's say, standards or another project? For example, from the in Svensk Byggtjänst, for example. Can it be also something like that?
It's generic. It's quite generic.
It's very generic, but there is also, which we have dealt with a little bit in previous sprints, depending on what you are actually referencing, you have a similar structure also for referencing external documents, for example. So if you're referencing a document, maybe you should look into the IFC document reference instead. Okay. So, but it's a very generic structure. This.
But as you see, we were thinking of being a bit mean and giving you sort of this task that you figure out yourself a bit in the library association and the classification association instructions, where we sort of now reference stuff from previous sprint, and with library association we also sort of, let's say, not encourage, we actually push you to find the land registration piece that in the computer interpretable listing. Let's see if how well you have been following when we were scrolling through the documentation. So it is sort of a bit of a, you know, the additional homework for the gifted kid.
Yeah, but it is optional.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and then the last thing here, which we find is also very sort of fundamental for well, at least most people that I know, is this classification association, which then gives you the possibility to reference an item in a classification. So, for example, in Sweden, I know Trafikverket, they like to use co-class, for example, which is a classification system. So you have IFC objects, which are sort of, well, they are classified according to the IFC nomenclature, but you can, of course, reference multiple classifications depending on your needs from any object. So, and I mean, the structure is really similar to other types of references to things. So that's what we are asking of you here, is to associate, maybe you should say some instance here. We are not specifying exactly which, but shall be associated with an IFC classification reference where identification and name shall exist. These are attributes in the IFC classification reference, and the referenced source shall reference the IFC classification occurrence that we associated with a project in Sprint 1.2. So the IFC classification sort of represents the whole classification system, right? And then one classification reference here should represent something, that an item within that classification system. So, any questions? Or maybe Sergey or Stefan wants to add something.
Maybe just to loosen up the official reading of the test instructions. Since we're all engineers here, right? Let's have some engineer fun, and let's give some exercises that so that we see how well we now navigate the documentation, where we find stuff, and yeah, I hope you find it as much fun as we did it when we were compiling the test instructions. You know, odd kids fun.
My kids don't find this funny, but they are not engineers either.
Exactly.
Can I maybe ask two naive questions? When talking about voxel, what we do here is about the definition and the structure of the voxel, not so much the data itself, correct?
No, it's sort of the geometry part. I mean,
right.
Defining the space that is occupied by the voxels. Only that for this sprint.
For the time being, yes.
And those voxels can then be sort of filled with data, but that will be in Sprint 3.x.
Next sprint.
Yeah,
exactly. And as far as the reference to classifications, is that the mean to reference to BSDD content?
I think it could be used to reference BSDD content. Yes.
probably going to be hard because BSDD references itself, but
I was thinking of national classification.
Yeah, that would be nice, yes, of course. But BSDD currently has all of the references back to itself, so that those are not that interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can show. I think here I have this bridge from Karin at Trafikverket. I'm just using BIM Vision here to display it, and I mean in this window now you can see sort of the IFC native structure, but she has actually used classification as well, so I can and many different classification systems actually.
Okay.
So for example, here we have a co-class classification, and this is sort of then another way of navigating the same data. And well, these codes are then known for the people that know co-class, right?
So likewise for the DAB, the DAB recommendation that they've just, if I understood right, published in English, but they, the German classification for tunneling, for BIM for tunneling.
You could actually even build a complete structure out of the classification references, because classification references can reference classification reference. You could have the co-class breakdown here.
Yeah.
So
I mean, co-class is taxonomy actually. I mean, it's a hierarchy like IFC is. So you could build that whole structure if you like.
But that's again the odd kids one. If you want to do it, we would be glad to check it.
Yeah. Another. I mean, we are sort of at the end of this meeting, but I think that Sergey also had a nice example when you worked with this guy in Norway, where they had this classification. They had this way of classifying sort of more work with regards to cost, which they used. So in that case, you attached cost items, which is also an entity in IFC, to the elements, and then you used that cost classification associated with the cost items. So they could really
and the object to the object classification. So there were two classification breakdowns in that file. That was a nice exercise.
Yeah.
But I don't blame anyone if they don't find this fun for the weird people.
Should we open up maybe the floor for questions from anyone on the call here on those different ways of using geometries? Briefly covered, but please.
I mean, otherwise there will be all the usual support calls on Thursdays.
Yep. Talking about which, Thursday next week is a Christian fest, and I was wondering, do we keep it, or do people are off basically? That's the Thursday the 18th.
It's a public holiday in Sweden, at least.
It is, yes.
Yes.
So who isn't off in the group?
I'm not off next Thursday.
You are not off, okay.
No.
Who else?
Same for me, Michael Davidson, also not off.
Okay. Is that a big deal still if we cancel next Thursday's call and then we join with each other again the following one?
I think it's okay.
I think it's okay also from our part, because here it's Thursday, and for us that's sitting also half in Norway, it's also Wednesday. That's a red day.
Is it?
So
Okay.
yeah. So I think it's okay if we can.
And along the same lines, not sure we have an example files ready yet, but that may be coming.
Try to create haven't had the time this time, but we'll try to create an example file for this sprint as well. Yes.
Do you think you have that ready by Monday?
Maybe Tuesday.
Maybe Tuesday. And
Yeah.
Stefan, on the checker front, how big of a work is that for you to update it?
I think I can keep up with Lars' schedule here.
So if we promise example files on checker by Tuesday, that sounds reasonable.
That sounds manageable. Yeah.
Yes.
I would say so. Or that
Okay.
at least we were gonna at least start with a pull request, right, Lars? Because we
yes. Yeah.
Of course, Lars is going to prepare an example file that's going to have some.
It usually has some errors.
Yeah,
on purpose.
You're not telling me about those.
Purpose.
Yes, that's the thing, right? Testing the checker.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
So then it makes even more sense to cancel the call on Thursday, because people would not have had much time to leverage what you will be delivering on Tuesday. So let's cancel the calls on Thursday, and then we speak with each other on the following one. Okay. Unless, Michael, you have a strong opinion against it.
No problem.
Thank you. I didn't know. I saw this Christian Fest was a day off in the US, but apparently it is not. Okay, last round. If anyone has, please, any questions, don't be shy. It's we are here to help you scroll through the documentation, understand how it is to be implemented. No question is stupid. Nope. Okay. Then, with this, I'll suggest we thank you for your time again. Hope this was informative, and please check for the availability of the example files and by Tuesday, as we said, next week, and then we will be speaking with each other not next Thursday, but the following one. Thank you, everyone. You have a nice evening, a nice day. Thanks again for your commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy
Bye.
coding.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.